All right. And we should also be live right now. Sarah, are you there?
Hi, everybody. Sorry to be late.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Thanks for hopping in. We got a good gang of folks to host you today. We'll do some quick introductions and curiosities before we kind of jump to you, Sarah. Everybody here, meet Sarah. Sarah, meet everybody. These are alumni from 2020 predominantly, and then Jody's kind of like an OG or original. She was part of our original program back in the day, maybe about 5 years ago at least, right, Jody?
Yeah,
So,
definitely a long time ago.
so you may be kind of discontextualized from what our model nowadays, right? But you
Yeah.
also have been following us from here and there. So why don't everyone just do an introduction of yourself, and school, maybe your project for your employer and so forth, and then share a curiosity of why you're interested in this particular employer, or what might be your curiosity. I know Tamana and Mai, you kind of joined up last minute, so feel free to share what you know about this particular employer. Jody, kick it off for us, please.
Okay. Hi, I'm Jody. I just graduated from UC Riverside with a political science degree. So you can obviously know I was super interested in meeting you, Sarah, because you're directly right in like the category that I'm super interested in. So I was curious how you got into city council and how just kind of your journey there from when you started young. So yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you. Maybe Ariba can kick it off for the second, and then maybe Taman and Mai afterwards.
Cool. So hi, I'm Ariba. I'm a sophomore at American High School. I was part of PilotCity's program just this past year, like Derek said. I was really interested in your project just to learn more about just like specific like use cases that like this would be used, like how, like what's your like vision, or like what the vision is for like this project, exactly like where do you like see this being like implemented and used in more detail. And yeah, that's pretty much it. My interests are kind of up this alley, kind of more on the, designing side. Like I really enjoy design. So like designing like how this notification system would work is kind of what I'm interested in hearing.
Great, thank you. Tamana.
Hi, I'm Tamana. I'm also a sophomore at American High School, and I was a former coding intern at PilotCity. When I read about this project, I think what really struck out to me was also the design portion. I'm really interested in design, and I feel like that's something I can further expand on in the future. So I'd be really interested in doing that.
Hi, my name is Ramai. I'm also a sophomore, and I was also a former coding intern. And in like the coding internship, we design and development at the same time, or sometimes we would do it like differently in teams. And I thought that that would be pretty cool to expand on that, as how Tamana wants to expand on designing aspect.
Great, thank you all. Sarah, we appreciate you spending your time with us. You've always been a very connective individual. Like usually when I talk to people in government, I have been slapped on the wrist enough to know to be careful when working with government in general, because of capacity, because of all the different political things going on, different policies, the mishmash. There's a lot of things that can go disarray. And I learned a lot by being a young person, just kind of going right in there and figuring it out, And so you're a particular individual that, is a normal human being, that cares about their community and, and want to serve. Right. And that's what I've gone as what they would call a vibe, right. From you. And so I've really just enjoyed our conversations in the past, and just you as an individual. And so we'd love to know, maybe you can kick it off by just sharing a bit more of why you're a council member, and love to hear more about your origins and how you came to be as well. And I'll keep it broad in general so you can kind of take your creative twists on it as well.
Well, hi, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and certainly your interest. And yes, it's been great to talk with Derek over a number of years. and see Pilot City evolve and grow and the great work that's been happening there. I'm always inspired by the students involved and the work that comes out of all of your efforts. And always, as I say, when Derek and I talk, we think we're going to start here and then end up, well, but what about this possibility? And what about this thing? And it's sort of who I am as a person. I say I tried to contain myself, but I escaped. And that I got into doing this kind of work in city government because and local government, because I like jigsaw puzzles. I get excited by saying, oh, wait, there's this issue in the community, and there's that part of the puzzle, and there's this other part of the puzzle over there, and then there's this ideas over here, and somebody needs to help bring them together. And so that's what I see my role as primarily, is if I can help build the bridges, put the pieces, smooth out the edges, that's what I see a lot of my role is, because there are really smart people who work for the city. There are brilliant people who live in our city and know what they need, and getting everybody to talk to each other is a challenge. A lot of my origin story in terms of politics really centers around my first job out of college. So I had thought about politics kind of tangentially for a long time, but never thought about it in a, what does that really mean? How does one really do that? Until I got into my profession, which was recreation therapy. So using play, recreation as a therapy to help people figure out how to use their time well, how to learn to walk, how to have some quality of life. It's a whole field that's a different talk. But anyway, so I was working in a local nursing home, which, by the way, I was never going to work in a nursing home. And that was my first job out of college. I was also never going to run for school board, but I did that too. So just be careful of what you're never going to. Anyway, so I'm working in a nursing home, and there was a piece of federal legislation that had enough support from both sides of the aisle to pass without debate. It would have helped the people that I was working with at that time. And the Speaker of the House wouldn't let it to the floor. I said, you know what? I want that job. And not necessarily the Speaker of the House job, but the job of this person who could either, you really have three choices. You can say, hey, thanks community for your input. Let's do that. Thanks community for your input. There's this piece missing. Let's work together to solve that. Or, fill out this piece of the equation. Or just ignore the input of the community and just write them off. And I wanted to be one of the first two and not have the third one happening. And so in Hayward, you can know who the mayor is. You can have lunch with the police chief. You can get to know the fire chief, whatever. And so I started to get involved in the community and learned about commissions, which is a way to sort of build that path. And fortunately, council members were willing to talk with me, which is part of the reason I'm willing to talk with other folks, because none of us gets there by ourselves. So I started learning about that. And in 2000, I took a program called Emerge, which definitely encourage people to look at. And in 2010, I was ready, and I ran for office, and I knocked on doors, and I got endorsements and raised money, and I lost. And I felt like I'd run full tilt boogie into one of those brick walls, and was just really devastated, because I thought that's what I was supposed to be doing. And how could that not have been the outcome? And fortunately, I had a good friend who helped me sort of dust myself off and realize, oh, right. So the reasons I was running, that helping people have their voices be heard, bring things to fruition, put the pieces together, all that was still true. And a lot of people asked, when I was knocking on doors to run for city council, people would say, what are you going to do about the schools? So in 2012, I ran for school board, and I got more endorsements and raised more money and talked to more people and did a better job with the campaign, and I lost. So I was pretty sure I wasn't supposed to be an elected official. That was really clear. And was doing a lot of soul searching about, so what? What am I supposed to be doing? What is it? Because I'd been leading groups and doing frontline work. And I'd moved by this point from long-term care in the nursing home to working with grandparents and other relatives, raising grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and families, and then was working in homelessness to address homelessness in our area, and really had done advocacy work, but really wanted to be the decision maker and tried to figure out how could I influence this stuff in a different way. And I got a phone call on the day of filing for City Council that said, so we believe in you. We believe you can win, and we have the resources to help make it happen. Will you run? Called my husband. I think I have to run for office again. Yeah, you do. But this time it has to be okay to lose, because he'd watched that devastation. And so I went into it with a whole different attitude. I did not expect to win. I did some stuff differently. Some stuff I didn't think was important, I did. Some stuff that I had thought was important, I didn't do. And overall, just worked my butt off and had some support in a different way than I had before, and I came in first. And so that was 2014. Fortunately, was reelected in 2018, and here I am.
Wow. I'll pause for a moment because Reba and I are on the back end, and she was like, "I really resonate with Sara right now." Maybe you can elaborate on that. Is this a thing that you feel connected by? Share more, Ariba.
Yeah, please.
Actually, yeah. What you were saying about how to kind of be almost like an advocate for like your perspective on like putting like pieces together, and like kind of being that like like that person who kind of like puts the pieces together from what people want and what your agenda is. And I think like I'm actually like currently in like a similar position, because not obviously on like not at that big of a scale, but like because I enjoyed like engagement positions, right? I like what I personally love. It brings me like a personal satisfaction to like engage community, right? And like advocating for community. And that's why like I run for like positions like student council and like leadership positions like that. And so I'm running this year, and I lost a few times back. But this year I kind of had like a different approach to my campaign, like you said. And I was really focusing on, like kind of like the parts to community, get that kind of like, the key to like having like a successful, like an engaging community. So like there one person would be like, my idea was like there was three, right? So there's the community, first of all. There's like a person who's like pumping out ideas, the critical thinker type of person who's like an engaging listener, someone who has a creative mind, kind of like pumps out ideas. And then the third person would be like the advocate, the person who would kind of be that bridge. And I kind of expanded more on how I would be like a qualified fit for this this third person, right? This like advocate, this like person who would kind of bridge the two together. And I think like what you said actually kind of like kind of like helped me a bit, like gave me some advice, and as well as like it was like really like inspiring to hear as well.
It's interesting. Awesome. It's interesting because it's you had this kind of storyline, right? And it's like a movie. It's like, oh, she lost, and then she lost again, and then she won. Like that story of perseverance, and no one never really know. I mean, I think I was talking to Councilmember Pete Ballou about this in San Leandro, and I was talking to him about our program and how we want to build pathways towards becoming an elected official. And he mentioned that he doesn't really believe in career politicians, right? And that's an interesting kind of point, right? And although it is still an opinion, it's also true and false at the same time, right? Like people should care, right, to be a politician, should care about community to go for it and keep persevering to get to it, and there's no pathway to be a politician. It's not something that we teach regularly, but beyond kind of government and economic classes. We don't teach people to be an elected official, and there's also such small amounts of them as well. And so it's in general, it's a unique position that requires a lot of commitment that a lot of people don't have, that people don't really want to, go for either, because of the variety of factors, from pay to, not having a representation or whatnot, right? So thanks for sharing that story. I didn't know that story, and that's why we like asking them you questions about that, because it's always very helpful to know. And I would assume that, what you kind of also studied or becoming, therapy through recreation, really is a good fit for a council member, right? Because how can we create environments where people can alternatively find ways to discover themselves, or find the best of themselves through other models that work better than typical models that don't work, especially when government's prescribing it, and there's not much, there's only so much traction that governments can get to, right, until they run out of ideas, and then a creative idea is needed, right? So I would actually like to, we've been kind of going to some of the stories with our employers during these podcasts, but we find that we lose a lot of time going too deep into the origin as opposed to the project. And the project also does unveil a lot of the things that represent you and your interests. So I'd like to actually unveil kind of what the project is, so that we can kind of go down that conversation. So essentially what we're asking is, there's this problem of engagement, right, with people in the community, and not just engagement, but effective communication of solutions, or opportunities, or requests for feedback, right, for community members. And the only real way that community members can get access to a council member or to the government is through these council meetings, right? And they're typically these PDFs that you download somewhere, usually online on a website, the city has, that typically is not up to date. And you have to go down about 4 or 5 rabbit holes maybe, to get to that one day's council meeting agenda. And then you have to look at it and be like, okay, what's on here that I care about, right? And I'm gonna then kind of come to that if I found the PDF and can go down that rabbit hole, right? So there's this fundamental issue, right, between government and what they're doing for their society that they have jurisdiction over, and the people who actually live there, who actually are participating in those services or programs, right? So tell us more, right, about this problem and how you see it.
Yeah. So my husband often says, when I ask him, would you like to, what do you think about this thing? Or what are, he'll say, what are you talking about this week or whatever? And he'll say, well, that's why I hired you to do this, right? There's a certain level of elected officials that it's really about, okay, everybody's busy with their day-to-day lives, kind of to your point earlier, Derek, that, so the whole point of having an elected official is kind of where the point person, where your voice, to sort of keep an eye on, does all the stuff that's going on that your taxes are paying for reflect the thing that you wanted done? It's our job. And there's 7 of us for a city of 160,000 people. It's a good number for a board. You can get stuff done when you have 7 people trying to do it and have diversity of opinion still. But that's 7 people. We may not have walked in, of the 7 of us, we may not have lived that thing that we're talking about. We may not realize that if we put the sewer line 2 inches to the left, that floods your backyard, and then you've got a whole other headache. We may not realize that you are an expert in agriculture in a way that nobody else in the city is. And so how could we possibly know to tap into that expertise? Because there's 160,000 of you. And even, if we took every city employee, that's only 800 people. So how do we talk to each other? How do we find each other? How do we find these points of common interest? Or even for somebody who wanted to not hire the city council member to do it, but actually wanted to be in the room and wanted to have a voice, a stronger voice in that conversation. How would you know when we were talking about that thing that you care about? And so, as Derek said, every week there are council meetings, there are committee meetings, and each of them has a staff packet and attachments and agendas. And so the question is, I cultivate a little bit of a list. If we've had a conversation and you said, I'm really interested in cannabis issues, I try to remember, oh, right, who was that? Okay, we've got a cannabis issue. Let me shoot off an email. It's not a particularly sustainable way to do that. And certainly any council member that came after me would not know who that was because I might forget to tell them. So human beings are fallible. So what if there was a way for the community to proactively say, hey, I know about this. And anytime you're talking about this, I want to know about it. And so the little bot in the expert, I know 3 of you are very expertise in design, so I know nothing. This is why we have partnerships. So, the intelligence of the computer technology crawls through these PDFs and says, oh, there's that word. And maybe, like a Google alert occasionally, right? Like I get alerts for Hayward, Wisconsin fairly regularly, but that's okay. I can take the fact that, 4 out of 10 of my alerts are maybe not something I care about, but that's okay. So, I can put in my thing. I get this alert. Hey, they're talking about whales. Great. I love whales. Let me look at that. Oh, it's a whale of an idea. That's not my thing. Fine. But, oh, wait, we're talking about our bay and I do care about that. So let me find that out. So it's kind of the best of the use, trying to answer the use case question as well.
Sure.
The overall vision is just this easy way for people to have a system that sorts for them and flags what they're interested in. So that was the short version.
Sure. If anyone has any particular questions, this would be a good time if you'd like. I'd certainly have my additional ones.
I have a question. How broad of a scale are you planning on implementing this? Like only City of Hayward, or are you planning on going like a bit beyond?
Yeah, I think if we could figure it out. Hayward has spent a lot of energy over the last few years trying to be transparent. And so I think that information's pretty accessible. We're pretty timely in when the information gets released, and pretty consistent on where the information can be found. So it feels like, again, not a lot of techno expertise here, but it feels like a decent case set of information to figure this thing out. And then every jurisdiction has some way that they're required by law to share this information. And so a lot of them use the same system we do, which is called Granicus. And so in theory, if we can figure out how this interface works, then we can talk to other cities, counties, special districts. There are a ton of them. And if we figure out Hayward, then, maybe we then build on, I represent Hayward on various other bodies, and maybe that's the next step. And then there is this thing called the League of California Cities, which is a statewide network of cities. There's one for counties, there's one for special districts, et cetera. So if we can figure out the system, then the potential is pretty big, I think. I would hope.
Where, like, this is maybe more of like a specific question, but like, do you see this being like something that, like, say if a student were to kind of, do this project, right? Then they'd kind of be would it be a thing where they'd be like handing it off to the people, like whoever's coming up writing this agenda, right? And so it would be kind of like something that we would be creating for those people, or would it be like, I don't know how, but like maybe like something that the community controls, or like would it be like a mix of both, saying like like a almost like a chat or like a forum space or something, to for like people to like say, oh, when is anybody gonna like talk about this, like when will this like XYZ be on the agenda, right? Like when will like whales be on the agenda, like is anybody planning on talking about that soon or something like that, right? And then like would it be like an interface where like both like us like not students what am I saying, like the community and people on like the elected official side could like both like implement together? Like what's your like opinion on that, like the vision of that, like what? Yeah, that's a really weirdly phrased question, but
Yeah, I think I'm tracking you. It's a great question. And it's sort of a second level that I hadn't really thought about. So the first level, I think it could be just sort of an app that people are able to subscribe to and put in, hey, ping me when, I care about discussions about whales in the city of Hayward that the council is talking about, right? Or give me any jurisdictional body within 50 miles of 94541 that talks about cannabis, whatever. So, different ways to sort of self-select what they care about. But I also love the idea of, hey, I'm a resident in your community. Is anybody going to talk about this? And sort of to proactively flag that and to have some kind of interface. Yeah, I have to think a little bit about how that would work. Maybe a lot of cities have a thing. In Hayward, it's called Access Hayward, but it's in some cities it's called 611. It's or C-Click Fix. I know San Leandro has one too. And basically it's an interface that says, hey, there's potholes on my street. Can you come fix them, et cetera. But it's also a way to say, I care about this thing. And so whether or not it makes sense to do that, to kind of partner with that, or if it's a mechanism of this to be able to proactively ask, it's a great question. The one other piece of that I'll throw out there is, the other reason it's a great question is because by the time it comes to the staff agenda, part of the decision has already been made. The council is still free to make any decision that they want. The community can point out that staff's recommendation works or it doesn't work or it needs to be adjusted or whatever. But a lot of work has gone into making that recommendation. And so having a way for people to give input before that recommendation gets finalized is also really valuable, because by the time it comes to council meeting at the final moment, really a lot of what council has power to do is say yes or no. And if what the community wants is okay, but it's really hard to craft that in a council meeting. So getting that level of early intervention is really important. And I hadn't thought about this for this project, but something to think about. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. I really don't want to go, but like, I have to hop out, sadly. If depending on whether we're still rolling, I might come back. I really want to, because like you're such a cool person. Just throwing it out there. So yeah, yeah. I guess I'll see everybody later.
Thanks for coming,
All right.
Ariba.
Yeah.
Thanks for representing over at ACOE.
Bye. I think it is really interesting what we're talking about, because there are layers of evolution that can occur with this particular kind of solution, right? I think at number one base is just, well, it's like follow the data, right? Where's the data? Well, the data is in Granicus, right? In these PDF documents that show agendas items, right? There probably is other data somewhere internally within a city staff, like a city manager's office, that consolidates all those items, right? And there might be some input coming from emails or, presentation confirmations or whatnot that are occurring, right? But generally it gets consolidated in an official format that's public in these kind of PDF formats, right? And so what's interesting is that if we just take that and process it, right, in some kind of engine that processes the language, and then, it says whales in it. I love how whales is like the main topic here. But whales pops up, we need, all the words are in this engine, right? So now we just need people who are interested in those words, And then if they can identify those words that they have interest in, then they can, be notified somehow, right? But then there's all these other evolutions that can occur, like, at the council meeting, right? There's people who want to hear about the topic, but now they want to give input, right? So that decision is influenced to the council member. So that's like layer 2 almost, right? Like, and that's exciting because now we're talking about solutions that can occur or input that can be given to a council member to make an effective decision, right? Or maybe the council member actually wants the feedback too, but can't get the feedback. But if the system automatically engages people with what they care about, then now you have this automated civic engagement system, or not automated, but gets closer to solving problems.
Yeah, I mean, maybe some kind of interface. We do have a list of like what's upcoming, what are future agenda items. And so maybe there's an interface with that as well, so that a council member or a city staff member can say, hey, we've got 23 people on the whale interest list. The shoreline master plan is coming up. Maybe we're doing a work session on that. Maybe they should know about that. Or we're doing a survey about that. Let me make sure those people get that.
Does City of Hayward collect data from people on when they want to speak at upcoming council meeting agenda before the day or that night?
Somewhat, yeah. Anybody can email council at any time. And so typically when people email on a sort of a hot topic, then they can get added to an interest list, but it's a little uneven. So it'd be nice to have a formula to do that, or sorry, say more about what you're thinking.
No, for sure. I think you're heading in the right direction. I think at this point we're kind of brainstorming. So again, if there's anyone that has any particular questions, please feel free to unmute yourself, and I'll kind of know that as a signal to have you ask a question. Tamana?
Yeah, I have another question.
Sure.
So I love the idea of this app and everything, and I love how you're getting like student input on it. But what specifically are you looking for from the students? Because in this program, we have until May to create a prototype type of thing. So like, would you want us to create like a design and create a features list that the app would include? Or would you want like us to create a prototype of like the actual app and present that to you guys?
That's a great question. I'm going to defer to Derek on some of that because I haven't, I've been an audience for PilotCity. I haven't been an employer before. So some of that I genuinely don't know the answer to. But I did want to respond to the kind of engagement with students piece, which I think is really important, is what I hear from students often is, I want to be involved. I have things to say. Student voices absolutely matter. It's great expertise that you guys have. And so, this is what I think in my almost 50-year-old body of what I think would be helpful. But I haven't been a high school student for quite a long time. I haven't been a college student for quite a long time. And so for people who are seeing communities happen and want to have a voice, what would be useful? What would that app look like that would facilitate being part of the decision making, if that makes any sense?
Jody, I see you unmuted.
Okay, I was like, can I talk? Oh, yeah, I just think when I was in high school, I used to attend city council meetings here in San Leandro, and it was a bit intimidating. So I think the app is definitely going to help with students in terms of they want to say something and they want to make changes on certain topics that they feel is like either a problem or they're interested in their city, but they're too afraid to kind of attend those meetings. Well, I guess can't really do that, but I know it is really scary to sort of talk to the city council members. You're standing there, they're all looking at you, and you're just like, oh, I really don't want to mess up, and I don't want them to like be opposed to what I'm saying. I want them to hear me out. So I think the app definitely will help not only like kids, college kids, high schoolers feel more comfortable to reach out, but I think also they have interpretations that I guess maybe older people don't always understand. So I think it'll definitely, I mean, I guess, because there always is a lot of problems with like the newer generation, right? So like sometimes older people have a hard time accepting certain new things, maybe new technologies. So I guess when people or when kids have the opportunity to talk through the app, I would hope that it would kind of reach out to more students and they would be more comfortable. But yeah, that's just my take. No questions.
Yeah, so one thing that I like to address with Tamana, what you're saying, like what do students actually create? You know, what are we asking them to make, right? And you know, I think we would ideally want an app because we think about apps now, right? As an easy thing you can download and kind of get. There certainly is, you know, apps that's harder to kind of get your hands on, and for populations that may not know how to use an app still and all that, right? So there still is, I think, a lot of factors, and I don't know I think we purposely kind of decided not to really define it for the students in some cases, right? What kind of notification system this is, you know? Maybe it's a text system that's manual at first. Maybe it's, you know, I think what's more important is processing the information, the data of the actual, you know, PDFs and categorizing all that data, you know, in a prototype format. I do think that requires a technology of some sort to process all those PDFs and to run natural language processing on it, and then pull out all the words that are most used in, you know, the month of, you know, of January of 2021, you know, to kind of categorize those so that we know what topics at least are first kind of used the most in the council meeting agenda of 1 month, right? Or 1 year, right? And then processing the data first, I think, is step one. And then number two is then allowing people to interface to access that data or to be pinged when that data, you know, reflects their interests, right? And so that's actually one thing that I wanted to kind of address in this podcast was, what are we building, right? And we certainly have a lot of coders, right, in our program that kind of linger around our program, we're finding, but not necessarily is everyone coders, you know, like that's one other problem, right? When we're talking about the Hayward community, talking about the San Leandro community, we're talking about the communities in the East Bay. We're not talking about a lot of people interested in coding. So are we looking to get solutions from people outside the city, inside the city? There's a lot of factors that I think about, you know, on how this program can be a success. But I certainly think there's a step one, which is just looking at all the PDFs and somehow finding a way to process all that information and then make it kind of available for a database, right? To kind of source and collect information from. And then step two is almost like the collection of the interest of the citizens, right? One question I have, Sarah, is there a particular type of community member that would be the most valid type of community member to kind of pilot this with, to have the most success? Like, you know, and even thinking about the future of what this solution could entail, right? Like even it got to that level 2 of engagement and input, and then maybe even a level 3, whatever the heck that is, right? Like, you know, is there a priority citizen member or community member or resident or stakeholder in Hayward that you think this would be best for as a start? And are there additional priority, you know, individuals? Like, who are we talking about here?
It's a great question. So let's see. So I did want to mention that there is a database in essence. There is all of the old packets, agenda packets and stuff are on the city website, FYI. I don't know if that's helpful to know. I just thought I'd throw it out there. But to answer your question, which is a great one, what comes to mind is there is this self-fulfilling prophecy that happens with voting. So if you're an elected official and you're running if you're running for office for the first time or you're running for re-election, right? I'm one person in a city of 160,000. Of that, let's say 80,000 of them are voters. Just a number off the top of my head. And of that, you're talking 30,000 households. I can't get to 30,000 households in a time, like even if I could, by the time I started, they wouldn't, I'd have to start so early, nobody would care about the election, right? So you've got a certain window. I can only reach so many people in a time that anybody cares to hear from me about the election. And so what ends up happening is that people prioritize, not surprisingly, but what they prioritize are the people who are going to vote, the people who have historically voted, right? Because they're most likely to vote again. And so it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't know that your voice matters, and if you therefore, or think that voting, anybody listens to that any of that works or matters, then don't vote. So then future candidates or existing elected officials don't come to you and say, hey, what do you care about, when they're doing voter outreach? So then why would I vote? Because they never talk to me. And I would love to break that cycle, because everybody matters. And giving help, my hope for this is that it gives folks, especially that don't know that their voice matters, a way to understand how, as you were saying, Jody, how to engage in the process. That would be great. That would be a huge win. To make it easier for the people who already are familiar with the system, that's great. But the win is the folks who didn't know.
And that may be through a different means of technology, right? Like maybe people don't engage with downloading apps as much. Maybe people text more. Maybe people like phone calls, right? So there's almost this process of collecting the preferences of the community that typically don't get engaged, and seeing how they typically like issues to be kind of presented. Or maybe the council meeting agenda items are presented on this interface, whether it's a text or an app or a flyer or whatnot. Maybe it's presented in a way where it presents like, hey, there's a program, right? Or there's a service that may be approved by council next month, right? And you might be interested in advocating for it, right? You might be interested in taking a stand on it. You might be interested in contributing some of your feedback, because based on the other data that we have, you indicated interest on it, right? So perhaps it's just a start for these different levels that it can evolve to, right? To have so that people are more civically engaged. I think that's probably it's like one of the biggest cookies to crack, I would say, for government, is how civic engagement occurs for people who typically don't engage, that are citizens and community members and residents, right?
Yeah. Sorry, the idea that came to mind based on what all of you are saying is also maybe this idea of some videos of, hey, have you never gone to a council meeting before? That could be pre-recorded from here's what really works. When you come to the podium and you say, that's all wrong, you should never do that, but you never tell me what it looks like if it's better, then it makes it really hard for me as an elected official to do something for you. And there are other techniques of, here's how to make the most of your 3 minutes. Here's what to do if they only cut it down to 1. Here's how to say the most important thing first. Some techniques that make it effective when you do show up in the room.
I feel like the product is evolving to live, right? Because we don't know the answer. Is that there's a lot of problems to solve with a lot of opportunities to decipher, right? Now, I will share that it doesn't necessarily help that we don't have a specific idea of what we want students to use or build solutions for, because they don't know what they don't know either, right? But it's also a very creative endeavor within itself, because it's a very, well, obviously it's an important problem, right? And we don't have a particular solution for, so that's where the students kind of come in, right? I even come to, there's even an extent of like, if we're doing Zoom meetings, from now on, or maybe councils like that because there's more civic engagement, but then they're going longer hours, they don't like that, so there's different, points there, right? But maybe like a level 3, level 4, you know, could be along the lines of like, maybe people are submitting videos of their comment, their 2 minutes, 3 minutes, right, to a system, right? And those are being transcribed, right, alongside the council meeting agenda and other input being absorbed in that, you know, item or that problem. And maybe that itself is, you know, bringing out the insights, right, for councils or community members or residents to interpret, right, to make judgments and so forth, right? So I do think there's this kind of potential door we're opening up, right, where technology in general, through processing data and optimizing the scale of what it can do, can actually help government do a better job. Now we're going to run into data privacy issues and, you know, people not trusting government and, you know, all these other factors. But that is the potential of what can be done, right, if we put those things aside and say, hey, we'll resolve that. You know, we're really just interested in you getting the topics that you need, right, and the input that you want to give, right? Anyone else has anything to comment on that? I guess, like, back to your question, Tamana, like, what would you want to build, you know, and what do you think students would want to build, or what they're capable of building, right, in a tangible way?
Like alongside like that idea, I also want to bring up like how I think it's like pretty good that you guys have like a vague idea of it. One of my teachers at school, he's like very like politically involved in everything, but he's like brought to our attention that he does have like a flip phone, and he's not that into technology or anything. So I think like if you're like not set completely on the idea of an app, but you're like willing to expand on like a phone call or like a text or maybe even a website or something, that probably benefit more people who like adults that can vote, and that aren't like that technology advanced or anything. So I like the idea how you aren't set on like one specific way that you're trying to get this information out, and how you're just putting it up to the students to like think of ideas on ways to engage the community.
And I think Sarah, maybe we can officialize it now or whatever, right? And you know, yeah, like a phone call, you know, because there are technology systems that, you know, can automatic. Oh, well, we obviously get them, and, you know, telecom carriers have did something about it finally. But, you know, all these robots that call us, right? Like, there are robots that can call people. There are robots that bots that can text people and get data from them, and then kind of bring it in, and then kind of, you know, shoot out, you know, hey, what are your interests? And you type in whales and trash, and, you know, and then it'll pop out something, you know, that'll say, hey, relating to items that you have interest in, A, B, and C are coming up on the agenda for this month, next month, and the month after that, right? Like, it could be a phone call, it could be a text, it could be an app, it could be, you know, whatever it may be. So maybe what the scope is, right, for this project is design, right, a solution that may be best for you, not get it running, not get it going, but what might be the solutions, right? And maybe design it, not asking students to say, hey, design it, figure it out, solve it, prototype it, deploy it on an app store, you know, but it's more like, hey, take this problem, take what's available, and design an architecture or design a solution, right? That's best. Maybe that's what we scope it to, right? How does that sound? Is that, you know, is this so urgent of a problem that we need it now, or can this be a multiple phase kind of project, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a new problem. It's, yeah, I mean, the more people are engaged, the better off I think we are as a community, as a society. And we have time to get it right and to do it well. And you make great points, Tamana, about different ways people could, I mean, is it an email alert? Is it a phone call? And does it maybe then have the opportunity, you know, press 1 if you want to call your council member today, press 2 if you need the agenda packet mailed to you. Press 3 if you need it in French. You know.
Yeah. I like this direction because it opens it up. It opens it up for creativity, because I think it's going to need creative solutions. I don't think, even if we were to define, okay, let's just say this, if we define it as an app, right, it would probably be unsuccessful, right? Because not everyone uses apps, right? Or understand English or read English, right? So that's what I think. That's why we have to define it on a broader level so we can source those. Renmai, any particular insights or thoughts from yourself? Don't want to miss the opportunity to gain your opinions as well.
I don't have any questions because I'm getting like a clear picture right now. And I would be more interested into like, instead of like prototyping and developing, actually, I would be interested into like seeing how the people would benefit from this app or whatever kind of platform. And it would be pretty cool to see what this can come up with rather than just like developing it and then like moving on with it. And then the people are like, oh wait, and then maybe we can even like get feedback from the people, and it could be like a double kind of thing.
And dovetailing on that, Sarah, so say students, let's anticipate there being solutions, right, for this problem that we have. And students are designing a solution. They're reading, they're looking at the data available, they're designing a solution. They have some good ideas that we think are promising. And now they have to like somehow engage the people who would use it, or they have to build out the real solution and then pilot it and make it happen and so forth. How would you use, the powers that be with you and others, to take that into a process of experimentation? How would you take that through? Like, walk a student through the process of making it happen if they have an idea, right? How does city government work? Is there a process of approval? Is there funding?
Right. So the thing to know about government is that there's not really available things. When I mean by that is resources. So, the government is busy doing the things that government does. We're spending money where we said we were going to. We're keeping programs running. We're keeping the sewers flowing and the water flowing and the roads smooth and services happening and so on. And so when the community or the council wants to bring something new, we have to figure out what it is we either have to stop doing or do differently to make room for that. And so to that end, one of the things that I need to do is to go to my city manager as this project evolves and say, so there's this idea. But again, I want to do that as early as possible. So actually, I'll be doing that next week to say, so there's this opportunity to collaborate with PilotCity and some amazing students there to think about this community engagement question. And I really appreciate the idea of starting to understand what the question would be. Right? What is it? What does it look like? How would it look? What would it look like if it was better? And to start working on that process. And hopefully what I'm trying to do is build a little bit of buy-in, both from city staff as well as my colleagues on council, so that to sort of raise awareness. Because right now, there's not really a resource ask. There's nothing different, right? We don't know what we're asking for yet. So right now it's just, hey, there's some work that I, as a council member, would like to engage with the community on and see what we come up with, FYI. But it sort of plants a seed of, okay, something may be coming down the pike that may take some city resource in the future. And maybe, hopefully, we make some room for that. And also the opportunity to say, hey, we in the city clerk's office, for instance, where, that may be somebody we want to have brought into this conversation at some point. She's great and she likes working with students. So I can't volunteer her time, but I can say she may be interested. She's the person who keeps all those records. She makes sure all that stuff gets uploaded. What would make sense for her? What would help her to communicate to the community? Or what is it that she how does that happen? How does that information get available? Anyway, so, then thinking about individual, like one-off resources like that, and then maybe something longer that says, okay, I'd really like our IT director to be part of, or his designee to be part of this conversation. Can we free up a little bit of time for him or his staff to come and work with a set of students on whatever that eventual solution comes into? And then, of course, okay, the thing got created. It's going to need this level of subscription fee. Can we build that into the budget? That's sort of the pathway I think it would take. Hopefully that made sense.
That's very helpful. And I'm glad we also started this conversation earlier, because we've been having these podcasts and we kind of go in depth with people's origin story, which I like the most. I like origin stories the most, and diving into what people, where they came from and, how they got there. But there's so much meat and bones and wealth in the project itself and what that person represents, and I'm glad we got through actually a lot of it. I think we came to a really good definition and scope and specification of what we know so far, right? And I think what we define is something that's fairly open, because it's a complex problem, right? And we specifically want to broaden it up to be open for design. And it's great that the process itself is also open for design, right? I mean, but the first key is, hey, what are we asking for? What is the design, so that we can ask for the right resources, right, to make it helpful. So one last question I have for you is this an entrepreneurial opportunity, or is this something that a single government can benefit only and house within itself? Because obviously, this is I mean, the problem is universal among cities and towns, right? So if, say, Hayward were to do this first, whoever's making the designing and producing the idea, what's, obviously it can be solving other solving other city government problems too, right? So how would you, I guess it's not really a question, it's more of a statement, but like, would you be open to having students, build this for their own entrepreneurial endeavor and then offer this to other cities and towns and communities across the country? Like, is that something that you want to participate in as well?
Yeah, and in fact, in some ways, that's easier, right? If the a lot of city stuff is created by somebody else, and then the city subscribes to it, software as a subscription, or buys the thing, the fire truck, whatever it is that somebody else built. And so having, internal expertise is great and is important and is typically most cost effective, but not always. Sometimes it really is about tapping into that great expertise. And so in terms of shaping this as an entrepreneurial experience or opportunity, one of the questions is sort of what are the costs? Right? What is it, if I as a city am going to allocate taxpayer dollars either as a one-time or as a long-term or as a subscription cost, what is it I'm getting from that that this is the most efficient way to do that and most effective way to do that? So those are the kinds of questions I would ask as a policymaker.
And I guess I would follow up with an actual final question, like, what are the benefits that a city would like to hear to purchase a solution like this? Like, what would they want to have need solved in order for it to be a fundable solution?
Yeah, so does it meet an identified community need? So communication. Does it facilitate, does it answer a community question? In this case, it's we do get well, I didn't know about that. And this won't solve 100% of that, but we get enough of that it's worth looking at and may be worth some investment in. We certainly look at that all the time, as all cities do. How do we communicate with our community as effectively as possible? And we do spend, the Access Hayward thing is a subscription. The city pays the company to do that. I think it's an ongoing thing, not a one-time, but I may be wrong. But our website, we paid for, both a one-time and an ongoing. So it's not an unknown thing, but it is that the question of what is it we want to solve I think is communication, facilitating two-way communication with the city on issues that the community cares about in the most efficient and effective way possible. That's my best guess at a problem statement. It's a great question that I don't know that I've fully fleshed out in my head. So,
yeah, for sure. I'm actually looking to access Hayward right now. Very good to know that things like this actually exist, right? So that students have context as they build the project for you, that they can kind of bring these things together by understanding what exists already, right? So last calls for questions. We're good if Sarah, you're good, and students are good, but we're heading towards the end already, but just want to be able to address any particular questions. Anything else?
I have a question, but I wanted to say something in the beginning, but I didn't want to interrupt. But I just want to say that I really liked your story, and kind of remind me of myself, because I just recently graduated. During the pandemic, it's been really hard to kind of get myself out there, especially if I want to be working with the city, doing anything with government. I just think it's really hard. But when I heard your story, it kind of, I don't know, just sort of inspired me, since you weren't expecting to go that route, and then you went another route, but you ended up liking it. And I also want to say how you went up from all your losses. I think that's really inspiring too, especially right now. But yeah, nice meeting you.
it's really a privilege to meet all of you. Thank you, Jody.
All right, wonderful note to end on. Thank you for your time, Sarah. We're gonna hold you back for just a little moment, but sure. Thank you all for attending and co-hosting on the alumni side, and Sarah for coming.